Hi guys, I'm Steve Doran and welcome to my channel. In this video today, we're going to be speaking about the Renters Reform Bill, and whether you're a landlord or a tenant, this is going to have an impact on you, and there's some quite serious things happening. So in this video, I'm going to break down exactly what the changes that are coming in are and what you can do about them and how to respond. So the first big change is Section 21. If you haven't heard about this one already, you must have been living under a rock. Now, Section 21 is a no-fault eviction notice, which previously you could serve to a tenant and get them out of your property for any reason. You didn't have to really provide much of a reason. However, now, if you're going to want someone out of your property, there has to be a cause, there has to be a fault. Or, for example, you want to move back into your property, you want to sell your property, they're in rent arrears, or they're carrying out antisocial behavior. Now, those are the reasons you can get someone out. But what does this actually mean for us as landlords? What do we need to take on board here? Well, this just brings home the utter importance of making sure you're vetting your tenants in the first instance thoroughly. So when you're taking people on board, that you carry out all of the regular checks. Now, for me, that is getting employers' references. And by the way, it's not just getting an employer's references, making sure that it's a legitimate employer's reference. If someone tells me they work for the NHS, and then when I ask them for their employer's reference, they said, give me an email which says dave@gmail.co.uk, I might start to raise a few suspicions there. Now, what I'm saying is credible employers' references, credible tenancy or landlord references from their previous landlords who can vouch the fact that they paid on time, they kept the place well, didn't have to take money out of their deposit, and also how much they were paying, affordability checks, credit checks. If you're doing the right due diligence up front, then you've got a lot better chance of not facing issues where you might want to get someone out later on. Now, we specialize in HMO properties. In particular, a large portion of our portfolio is made up of shared houses. It's incredibly important when you're taking someone into a shared house that they're going to fit into that environment as well, because it's not just a person in that property, it's now 4 or 5 other unrelated, sometimes more unrelated people in that property, and the dynamics can shift if you get the wrong person in that property. In fact, in my experience, you get the wrong person in an HMO, then that person doesn't want to move out, everyone else does, and you can have a bit of an exodus and struggle to get other people in. So vetting is super important, following the standard process, but also, and I've always said this, but following your intuition. When you actually speak to somebody and meet somebody, how do they come across? And if I don't feel entirely certain about somebody, then I will ask myself the question why, and I would prefer to gravitate to somebody who I feel comfortable with. Remember, when you get in a landlord-tenant relationship going, it is just that, it's a relationship. So you're going to be dealing with this person on an ongoing basis, sometimes 10, 20, 30 or more years. So you need to make sure that this is a person that you can see yourself entering a long-term relationship with. So due diligence, more important than ever. So I'm not overly worried personally about the abolition of Section 21. If you look at the positives here, this means that someone can truly make it home a home. They can settle in as they should be able to and know that they're going to be there for life. It does mean you can end up in a tricky situation if you get the wrong tenant, but we can limit that risk by making sure we're qualifying and doing our due diligence on tenants correctly. And also, in my experience, if you get the right tenants, I can't think of a single occasion when I've had to serve a Section 21 or ask someone to leave a property. Why would I? If you've got a good tenant, they're paying on time, they're easy to deal with, and you've got a nice ongoing relationship with each other, then you're going to want to keep them in the property. You're going to want them there as long as possible, and you're going to want them to stay. So that's what's happening. That's how I deal with it. And the main thing there is just making sure you're getting the right people into your properties that you can deal with on an ongoing basis. But do I see it as a major problem? Not really. In fact, not at all. You're probably wondering, where is this at and when is it happening? Well, it's been through different stages already. So it's been through the House of Lords, it's been through a couple of readings at the House of Commons, and the government are aiming for royal assent around springtime this year, 2025, with implementation aimed for by summer or at least the second half of this year, 2025. So in summary, it's imminent, it's happening, and we need to be prepared. Now, the second thing to be aware of then is the abolition of fixed-term tenancy agreements. Now, in the past, as you may know, you'd offer an assured short-hold tenancy agreement to a tenant. It would usually be a minimum term of 6 months. However, there no longer is a minimum term. All tenancies will be periodic. That means they're on rolling monthly contracts. If a tenant wants to leave, they give 2 months notice and then they're able to leave. a landlord cannot terminate a tenancy within the first 12 months. It's worth being aware of that aspect as well. So very different in terms of the way that tenants are contracted. This means that a tenant can move into a property for a couple of months, decide they want to move out, give 2 months notice and be gone. There's a lot more flexibility from the perspective of a tenant. From a landlord's position, you're giving someone a bare minimum of 12 months if they don't want to leave, which is fine. Either way, reverting back to what we said, unless there's a real genuine reason for them to leave, you're not going to be getting them to leave anyway. So worth being aware we're moving into periodic contracts. To be honest, for quite a long time now, when somebody's fixed contract runs out, we've always let them roll on to periodic. I've never been obsessed with refixing somebody into a new agreement, unless, of course, you happen to be increasing the rent to be in line with the market rate of rent. So we're moving into rolling monthly. Let me know your thoughts on that one in the comment, and let's keep on pushing through. The third and final point that I want you to be aware of from the Renters Reform Bill, it's not the only other point, but these are the main points in this video I want to cover off. Now, this point relates specifically to rent increases. Now, as a landlord, what this means is you can't just go and slam a rent increase. Firstly, thing you need to know, you can't put a rent increase in a tenancy agreement. You can't put an automatic rent review clause anymore. That's forbidden moving forward. And the next thing you need to know is you need to give 2 months notice for a rent increase. And of course, it has to be in line with the market value, which some of that it should have been anyway. And realistically, you should be given a couple of months notice for something like that anyway. So do I see anything glaringly challenging here? Not necessarily. What some people are saying is, yeah, but they've introduced this thing where tenants can now challenge the rent increase. Well, just to let you know, tenants could always challenge a rent increase. But what they have done, and again, fair enough, is they've made the process clearer. So if a challenge was about the rent increase, if a tenant didn't think it was fair or in line with the market rate, just to be clear, if they don't like it, that's not how this works. If they don't think it's in line with the market rate or a fair assessment of what the rent could be, then they have the ability to challenge that and take it to a first tier tribunal where they can then have a hearing to see whether or not that rent increase can be upheld. Now, this was always the case. You could always challenge it and go to a first tier tribunal. But what they have done, and rightfully so, is they are proposing and they're planning to clear up the procedures and make it a lot more straightforward and easy to go through that hearing. So you're hearing the headlines sometimes. They sound ominous. They sound scary. Do I think that's a big deal? Not necessarily. You can still increase rents in line with the market rate. You've got to give 2 months notice in order to do so. And it's got to be in line with the market rate or they can challenge you. Well, guess what? It should be in line with the market rate anyway. So that's the 3 main things that I wanted to cover off. There's other little things to be aware of, like pets are automatically allowed now. You can't just say no pets like you used to say back in the days. Yep, no pets allowed. Pets are automatically allowed unless there's a real tangible reason why you can't have pets or the sort of pets or the volume of pets that particular tenant is proposing to have at the property. And just looping back, I know we spoke about Section 21, but remember there is that Section 8 and some of that's being strengthened. So the idea is a lot of the processes will be made digital, because what you hear about is a tenant stops paying the rent, they get stuck in the property for 12 months and you can't get them out. Now, there are some issues I've got here. For example, if you're going to serve a Section 8 because somebody hasn't paid the rent, they're going from the tenant being 2 months in arrears to now the tenant has to be 3 months in arrears before you could actually serve a Section 8 and get them out. However, what they are saying is they're going to streamline the process, so when you want to get them out, you can get them out a lot easier and a lot quicker, which I don't know. Let me know your thoughts on all of this in the comments. But that's the information. That's what's happening. That's what you need to know. And we're looking at the second half of this year. So it's going to be really important to keep in tune with the news, to keep in tune with your obligations as a landlord, to make sure that you're compliant and that you're covering yourself so you can serve the correct notices if you ever need to. If you like this content, of course, like and subscribe. I will be updating you nearer the time and providing you with everything you need to know to stay on the right side as a property investor. You're welcome.